Welcome back to another episode of Whiskey and Wisdom, the podcast where we pour a glass of something strong and dive deep into the stories, secrets, and souls behind some of the greatest spirits ever bottled. I'm your host, Whiskey Dan, and today we're going to travel back to the roots of Tennessee whiskey. But this isn't just a story about a brand. It's a story about friendship, forgotten history, race, redemption, and the true heart behind one of the most iconic whiskeys in the world, Jack Daniel's. More specifically, today we're talking about two men, one whose name you've seen on millions of bottles and one whose name nearly vanished into obscurity. That is, until the truth finally resurfaced. I'm talking about Jack Daniel and Nearest Green. So pour yourself a glass of that charcoal-mellowed goodness, get comfortable, and let's jump in. Part 1, The Legend of Jack. Let's start with the name everyone knows, Jasper Newton Jack Daniel. Jack was born sometime in 1848 or 1850. It's a bit fuzzy because record-keeping back then was about as smooth as unaged moonshine. What we do know is that Jack was one of 10 children, orphaned young, and sent to live with a local preacher, grocer, and distiller named Dan Call in Lynchburg, Tennessee. Now here's where the story gets good. Dan Call had a distillery on his property, and like many distilleries in the American South during the 1800s, it relied on enslaved labor. One of the men working the stills was Nathan Nearest Green, an enslaved African-American who wasn't just helping out, he was the master distiller. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. The man running the still, teaching techniques, controlling flavor profiles, was a black man named Nearest Green. Jack learned everything from Nearest: how to ferment corn, how to master the Lincoln County process. That's the charcoal filtering method that makes Tennessee whiskey so distinct from bourbon, and how to make smooth whiskey before he could probably even shave. Part 2, Nearest Green, the first master distiller. Now, Nearest Green was no ordinary distiller. He was the kind of craftsman who could take corn mash and turn it into liquid gold. Dan Call himself admitted, and I quote, "Uncle Nearest is the best whiskey maker I know." Nearest became more than just a mentor to Jack. He was his teacher, his friend, and later his employee. After emancipation, Jack Daniel officially hired Nearest Green to be the first master distiller of the Jack Daniel Distillery, the first officially recorded master distiller in America, period. And yet, for over a century, his name disappeared from the story. But back then, Jack knew. He respected him. Jack even worked alongside Nearest's sons and grandsons for decades. They were family. They were the backbone of that whiskey. And that's where the legacy gets both beautiful and complicated. Part 3, Building a Legend. In 1866, Jack Daniel officially registered his distillery, making it the first registered distillery in the U.S. That date is proudly stamped on every bottle. But let's be real. Jack wasn't doing this alone. Nearest Green's influence was literally in every barrel. As Jack's distillery grew, so did the demand. He moved the distillery to Cave Spring Hollow, a pristine limestone spring that remains the water source to this day. That soft, iron-free water? It's the secret sauce behind that mellow, sweet Tennessee whiskey. Jack wore his signature suit, hat, and boots. He marketed the brand like a showman, charisma, class, and a whole lot of hustle. But behind the scenes, the whiskey was still rooted in the process Rav. Nearest taught him. And to Jack's credit, he never denied it. He honored Nearest in ways unusual for a Southern businessman at the time. He paid him, he trusted him, he gave his sons jobs, but history didn't write it that way. Part 4, The Erasure of Nearest Green. When Jack passed the business to his nephew, Lem Motlow, in 1907, the times were changing fast. Lynchburg's small town became the epicenter of a national brand. But as decades passed, especially through Prohibition and the marketing machine of post-war America, Nearest Green's name started to vanish. Whether it was racism, marketing strategy, or simply historical negligence, his contribution faded into myth. The story of Jack became a one-man legend. Nearest became a footnote, if mentioned at all. It wasn't until 2016, over a century later, that everything changed. Part 5, The Revival of the Truth, 3038. Let me introduce you to Fawn Weaver. Fawn was a best-selling author and businesswoman who stumbled upon a 2016 New York Times article hinting at the hidden history behind Jack Daniel's whiskey. That article mentioned Nearest Green as the enslaved man who taught Jack Daniel how to make whiskey. Fawn went all in. She moved to Lynchburg. She began researching, interviewing descendants, digging into dusty records. What she uncovered was not just a whisper of truth. It was a rich, vibrant legacy that had been buried for too long. Fawn didn't stop at research. In 2017, she launched Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, named after the man who should have been celebrated from the start. Part 6. The Rise of Uncle Nearest, 3841st. Uncle Nearest whiskey has exploded in popularity. And get this, it's now the fastest-growing independent American whiskey brand in history. It's award-winning, it's critically acclaimed, and it's family-run, with Nearest descendants still involved. Even better, Jack Daniel's and Uncle Nearest distilleries now work together. They launched a joint initiative called the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative to support black distillers and entrepreneurs in the spirits industry. So not only has history been corrected, it's been redeemed in the most powerful way. The student and the teacher are now side by side at last. Part 7. What we can learn from Jack and Nearest. This is more than a whiskey story. It's about what happens when we tell the whole truth. It's about mentorship, legacy, respect, and reconciliation. It's about the difference between erasing history and honoring it. Jack Daniel's wouldn't be Jack Daniel's without Nearest Green. And Nearest Green's name now stands proudly on shelves, awards, and history books, not just as a mentor, but as a pioneer. And it also reminds us it's never too late to make things right. Never too late to give credit where it's due. Never too late to raise a glass to the ones who came before us. Closing thoughts. So as we finish this episode of Whiskey and Wisdom, I want to leave you with this. Behind every great spirit is a greater story. And sometimes the most important names aren't on the label, but they should be. To Jack Daniel and Nearest Green, two men who changed the world one barrel at a time, we raise our glasses. And if you haven't already, go grab a bottle of Uncle Nearest 1856. Taste the legacy, share the story, and pass it on.
Outro 59060.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram at Whiskey and Wisdom Pod. We'll be back next week with another pour of insight and storytelling. Until then, stay curious, sip slowly, and always drink responsibly. Cheers,